very large lizard causes a great deal of inconvenience while trying to lay some eggs in Madison Square Garden in Godzilla, one of 4 new movies we're going to be reviewing this week on Siskel and Ebert, and we'll also have a report from the Cannes Film Festival. I'm Roger Ebert of the Chicago Sun-Times, and my colleague Gene Siskel had surgery a couple of weeks ago, and I'm very happy to report he's well on the road to recovery. Gene has seen all of the movies on today's program, and I think we're going to be hearing from him all during the show. Are you there, Gene?
Yes, I am, Roger. I'm Gene Siskel of the Chicago Tribune, and I hope that our producers have selected a really good photo of me that our audience will be forced to stare at for the next few minutes. Okay. I wonder if such a photo exists.
You're looking great, Gene.
Oh, thanks.
You look fabulous. Okay.
You're an excellent critic.
Okay, now on to Godzilla, which plays like they took apart 6 other monster movies, threw out the good parts, and then tried to reassemble what was left in the dark. Anyone who has seen many giant creature movies will recognize all the obligatory stops along the way, like the ominous early warnings, the destruction of famous landmarks, and the monster who makes a comeback after you think it's dead. The monster is never dead the first time around in these movies. I didn't even mind the formula. I just wish it had been done better. Consider this scene, for example. Matthew Broderick plays a scientist called in to determine what kind of beast caused a disaster in Panama. Watch the way the movie goes for a cheap shot as the camera pulls back.
I'm a biologist. I take radioactive samples and I study them.
That's great. Here's your sample. Study it.
What sample?
You're standing in it.
I don't see it.
Yeah, it's a giant footprint, all right, but obviously the scientist would have known that he was in Panama to study footprints. Anyway, before long, Godzilla has arrived not at its usual destination of Tokyo, but in King Kong's old stomping grounds, New York. Another problem I had was with the monster's size. He's as tall as a 30-story building in some shots, and yet here they're afraid he might escape into the 20-foot-high tunnel system. Of course, logical questions like that are sort of beside the point. If Godzilla worked as a monster movie, I'd be happy, but it doesn't. There's not a single scary shot in the whole movie, and the monster itself lacks the majesty and mystery of the earlier movie Godzillas, even though they were in schlock films. Somebody told me it seemed less like a threat than like a pathetic, frightened animal, and you know, that's right.
Roger, I agree with you. You mentioned and complained that the film had all the standard elements of big monster movies. Mm-hmm. It's missing one: terror.
Exactly.
I was never afraid of Godzilla.
That's absolutely right, Gene. In fact, most of the time, I thought I'm just looking at special effects. I never had the illusion that there was a monster there at all. I just thought this is animation or this is some kind of a model.
You just see a big, wrinkly creature, you know, stumbling across the landscape. There's no terror in this film, and that's stunning. I mean, that would be the last thing I would expect from this picture. Let me tell you another problem they have. Frequently, they use dialogue instead of action. Mm-hmm. For example, we're told that the monster, once he starts ripping through Manhattan, there's a report that there's looting in the Disney and Warner Brothers stores on 57th Street.
Yeah.
Show us that stuff.
Absolutely.
Don't have somebody say that in dialogue. Show it. It's obvious. It's a natural opportunity for humor with Godzilla playing with all the plush toys. It's not done.
What did you think about Mayor Ebert and his sidekick, Gene?
I thought that seemed petty.
Yeah, I did too.
It does seem petty, Roger. I mean, I was used as a villain in another picture called The Ref, and Siskel was the name of the villain. And, you know, it's such a distinctive name, an odd name, that, you know, audiences are thinking, well, all right, when's Ebert going to show up? Now, you shouldn't be thinking about that during a picture.
Yeah, the only good thing about Mayor Ebert and his sidekick was that at least Godzilla didn't step on us.
Well, but Roger, I fully expected that to happen. And I think the audience is waiting for that to happen.
Yeah, maybe they should have included that.
Again,
bring him on stage, at least squish him, right?
Exactly. There are missing scenes.
Okay, next movie and
Our next film, Halloween 2, is the sequel to the well-known and well-made 1978 horror film that made millions out of telling very well, the story of a maniac who terrified a bunch of attractive female babysitters. The killer in that picture escaped at the end of the film after being shot at very close range, and he's back now in Halloween 2 chasing the same babysitter, Jamie Lee Curtis. As the movie opens, Jamie Lee Curtis has been taken to the hospital to recover from the wound she suffered in the first picture, but the maniac invades the hospital, so she escapes to the parking lot. as psychiatrist Donald Pleasance goes into the hospital to try and corner the madman.
Go and check all the rooms down there. Go on.
Dr. Loomis.
You stay with me and shut up.
Boy, have we seen that scene before in so many movies since Halloween came out. The big secret in this film is, why does the killer have such a fixation on Jamie Lee Curtis? Well, we find out eventually, but the answer isn't all that surprising or interesting or shocking. I was totally disappointed by this sequel for all the standard reasons that most of us are dissatisfied with sequels. Number one reason, there's a different director this time. He's not as talented as the stylish director John Carpenter, who created the first Halloween film. Second reason, the film offers nothing new, just repetitive shots of the killer and his disgusting chalky face popping into view, usually in the background, saying nothing, and slowly, steadily stalking his victims, waving a thick knife. This worked once, not this time. I wasn't scared in Halloween 2, I was just grossed out.
You know, it's ironic that the original Halloween inspired so many countless dozens of imitations.
Right.
And for 2 years, we got nothing but movies in which their only ambition was to litter the screen with dead teenagers.
Right.
Now we get Halloween 2, and it's a pale imitation of the imitations. It's not worthy of the original film. The nice thing about the first film was you had a hierarchy of morality. You had the good girl, Jamie Lee Curtis, who was kind of resourceful and intelligent, and she tried to get away and tried to solve the situation. The bad girls got killed. In this film, it's totally nihilistic. Everybody gets killed. There's no pattern to it. And Jamie Lee Curtis is not, she's lost her intelligence, she's lost her resourcefulness, she's just reduced to being a pitiful person crawling around helplessly.
I also think that we've seen these tricks before. I mean, that's really what happens. The guy was scary once. Well, you see him another time, he's not so scary. Some films don't need sequels. I know there's a tremendous commercial impulse to do it, but some are so good and so fresh, don't make a sequel to it unless the guy is going to do it again. It's a disappointment, and I think that people, if they see the first one, are going to realize just how bad this picture is.
But Part 2 is doing okay at the box office. What do you think the chances are of Part 3?
I pray that I don't have to suffer through that.
Better not to think about it, okay?
Let's step outside.
You! Get out of here! You're obsolete! That thing is a killer!
Peter Weller again stars as a mechanical policeman in RoboCop 2, this time battling an evil version of himself. RoboCop 2 is one of 5 summer movies we'll be reviewing this week on Siskel and Ebert. I'm Gene Siskel of the Chicago Tribune.
And I'm Roger Ebert of the Chicago Sun-Times. Our first movie is RoboCop 2, and all during this movie I kept asking myself, how can a movie this violent and confused also be this funny? It's like there are 2 movies here. One is an hilarious satire on futuristic advertising, and the other one is an exercise in violence that really offended me with its portrayal of a young boy as a vicious killer. The movie begins with Detroit in still more trouble than it was in the last RoboCop movie, and Dan O'Hurley plays the billionaire who wants, in his words, to take the city private.
RoboCop 2 will seek out every laboratory, every dealer, and rid our city of mutants. Things will be a lot quieter with this boy around.
Peter Weller plays RoboCop again, and the movie raises the question of whether he's more of a man or a machine. It's one of several loose ends that never get tied up.
Are you Alex Murphy? No.
Are you human? No. You are simply a machine.
A machine.
Linda Bauer plays the psychologist who reprograms RoboCop, and there's a subtle hint here that RoboCop may be deliberately giving her the answer she wants. That's also not followed up on.
You know, I'm really very lucky. We can do in moments with you what would take years with a human patient.
I'm really very lucky.
Now, what I couldn't show you because the studio didn't include him in the scenes they supplied is a young boy named Hobb, who is played by Gabriel Damon and is the right-hand man of the drug dealer. This is a kid who looks about 12, and he mows people down viciously with a machine gun and uses a whole lot of R-rated four-letter words. It really disturbed me to see this little boy in this violent role, and it disturbed me even more when I started to think about it because RoboCop is rated R, but as everyone knows, kids do get into R-rated movies like this one, and even more of them will see it on home video. Was this 12-year-old criminal written into the movie to give the underage viewers someone to identify with? I'd like to think that wasn't possible, but I can't think of any other reason for such an unlikely, depressing, inappropriate, and distasteful script decision. Isn't any age group immune from violent cynicism?
Well, that was my reaction to the picture. I was sort of flabbergasted. You sit there and these words are coming out of this kid. Now, I'm a big fan of Stanley Kubrick's A Clockwork Orange, which showed people probably more in their 20s, a roving gang, a street gang, and I can understand why that can be done with intelligence and with a point. Here, it's just like they're looking for a new trick, like a different kind of monster. All right, we'll make the kid the killer, and it wasn't even winked at anyway. It was played pretty straightforward, and it had. And you mentioned that a film this funny. There were just a couple of bits, Roger. I mean, you have to be careful. There were a couple of cute bits in the film that are funny. The pictures they add.
More than a couple, Gene, but they just are dropped in. It's very strange because the movie is one thing, and then every once in a while, it's like you're watching television, and you get these commercials, like the commercial for the seatbelt that fries the car thief.
That opens the picture up.
There are several moments like that that I did laugh at, and I thought, gee, this is funny. I'm laughing, and now I'm back to the dreary, depressing movie, which is a mess as far as the screenplay is concerned, which is very offensive in the use of this 12-year-old. Now, make no mistake about it, this kid does kill people.
Yes.
He does take over the drug lord's gang.
Yes.
He does mastermind
and it
everything.
isn't played for laughs
No,
in any way. It isn't played cute. It isn't Bugsy Malone. It's mean-spirited, ugly, and you said the screenplay is a mess. It is a mess. There are stories that are not tied together. In the first film, we had warm feelings toward this RoboCop character, a man, some kind of mutant in a machine, and here none of that.
Can't even make up its mind if he's in there or not.
What the hell are you doing in my closet?
Yeah, that's the old reliable scene where a perfectly innocent person does a completely insane thing and is mistaken by somebody who was scared out of her wits to begin with. That's the best friend and roommate in the closet. Now, why didn't she turn on the lights when she came into the apartment where she lives? Why did she make creaky noises? Why did she hide in the closet when she knows that her best friend has been terrified of slashers for the last 12 months? I'll tell you why. Because a movie like I Still Know What You Did Last Summer is so bankrupt of ideas that it can't even come up with interesting cliches. The movie stars Jennifer Love Hewitt as a girl who is still being stalked because of a traffic accident that happened not last summer, but actually the summer before last. A mad slasher dressed up as the Gorton's fisherman in a slicker and rain hat is chopping up everyone around her. Hewitt and a roommate, played by the pop singer Brandy, went a trip to the Bahamas with their boyfriends, played by Matthew Settle and Mekhi Phifer.
If I had known for just 1 second you'd be back to bother me, oh now go.
Everyone's a damn singer.
Just turn around now, 'cause you're not welcome anymore. Don't know the lyrics, hold on.
It's him.
Sure enough, the mad slasher in the raincoat has followed them there. Now, how did they win the trip to the Bahamas? On a radio station contest where they said Rio was the capital of Brazil. Well, that's the wrong answer. The answer is Brasilia, and the contest is a phony. But frankly, I was surprised these characters even knew Brazil was a country. I Still Know What You Did Last Summer is a deadening series of setups and slashings, setups and slashings, setups and slashings, and for its viewers, it's a waste of 90 precious minutes that they can never get back. Just think, Gene, that's 3 hours between the two of us, and if you multiply that by thousands of people who will see this movie, it adds up to months, years, even centuries lost forever to the human race.
Yes, how if we'd all pulled together, we could have solved some very big problems. We could have gone to a disaster site and, you know, put sandbags by a raging dam.
That's right. We could have stopped flooding. We could have tutored kids who want to learn how to read. Maybe have a used clothing drive or something. Think of the hours of volunteer labor that this movie has taken out of the human time pool. It's shocking.
I'm going to go home and just cry.
I think I'm going to start crying right now. This is another film now that is very much of an unpleasant discovery. It's an unpleasantly, absolutely reprehensible little sleaze pit of a movie named Friday the 13th Part 2. And of course, this is a sequel to last summer's movie Friday the 13th, and it's a continuation of the senseless, gruesome, violent murders we saw in that first film. When we did our special edition of sneak previews on movie violence directed against women a few months ago, Friday the 13th was one of the movies we attacked. Well, Friday the 13th Part 2 isn't just against women, it's against everybody. The movie's distributor, Paramount Pictures, isn't providing scenes for television reviews, nor would they let us make an excerpt from the film to show you. Maybe they're not very proud of this movie, and maybe they shouldn't be very proud of this movie, but they sure are advertising it heavily. And that's the strategy behind films like this. They saturate television with a violent ad campaign, hope to make their money quickly before word gets around on how scummy the movie really is. Here's the way this film is being sold on television.
The body count continues. 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23.
Jeff?
The day you count on for terror is not over. Friday the 13th, Part 2.
Well, that condenses the high points, or maybe I should say the low points of this sequel. It exists only to show killing and mutilation. In the movie, young camp counselors return to the woods where the summer camp massacre occurred in the original Friday the 13th, and they hear stories about a kid who drowned in the lake, or did he? Nope. The kid is turned into a monster who lurks in the woods and carves up unsuspecting young camp counselors. The teenagers try to hide, but this monster just keeps coming. He's almost a supernatural force. The characters in the movie are never developed. They're just interchangeable victims. And the killer is not developed either. He functions only as a murder machine. The teenagers fight back with pitchforks, but what difference does it make? How can there be dramatic tension when we know this monster can't be killed? Friday the 13th Part 2 is a disheartening and depressing movie because it contains an absolutely negative view of human nature. It's just a series of teenagers who come on screen, say a few words, and then they're hacked to pieces. Among the movie's low points is a kid in a wheelchair who has his head hacked open by a machete, and a young couple who are both impaled by the same spear. This isn't a movie, it's a cinematic geek show. It seems to be made by and for people with no cheerfulness, no hope, no trust in human nature.
I think that's well said, and I can only add that, yeah, when the machete went into the head of the kid in the wheelchair, that's about when I gave up on the picture. Depressing is the key word in this discussion, because I think some people say, oh, they're just picking on that same old thing again, and what I'm saying is no. I'm only picking on films, horror films, that are depressing, not exhilarating, depressing. It's the same movie shot after shot, and it's depressing.
I walked into the theater, I sat there, I thought, gee, the first one made so much money, maybe for Part 2 they decided to spend a little money, spend a little talent, have a little imagination. The movie is so cynical. It's simply a series of mutilations and murders. This movie is made by people who hate movie audiences.
Well, the other thing that I can think of is I had the same expectations. I said, well, let's see, maybe they'll go another way. Maybe they won't have anybody killed. Wouldn't that be clever? Wouldn't that be challenging, fresh? No, no. Bang, bang, bang. Oh, well, the arrival of this cute little canine means it's time for Dog of the Week, the regular feature on this show where each of us picks the week's worst movies.
That's right, Gina. My dog this week is a fish called piranha. And how do you like this for an example of brilliant thinking? See, the government has this secret project to create a new breed of piranha fish that can live in salt or fresh water, can reproduce 3 times as fast as before, and could be a secret military weapon in the Cold War. But the fish are accidentally released into a river, and they start attacking innocent swimmers and families on vacation with their tiny little low-budget jaws. Well, my favorite scene is when a victim is in the water, being eaten alive by millions of piranha, and Kevin McCarthy comes to the rescue. Now, how does he come to the rescue? By diving into the water, naturally, and swimming toward the piranha. That's really great thinking, right? Next, they'll probably make a rip-off of the Towering Inferno, in which one guy jumps off the building and another guy jumps off to catch him.
Okay, now here's, however, where I'd like to make a critical distinction, because Scenes from a Mall was merely a bad movie, a disappointment, whereas our next movie is truly horrendously awful, one of the most cheerless and unpleasant times I've ever had at the movies, and I've been going for a long time. The name of the movie is Nothing But Trouble. It was directed by Dan Aykroyd. It stars him in 2 roles, John Candy in 2 more roles, plus Chevy Chase, Demi Moore, and a group of assorted cretins in other roles. And the fact that this movie was advertised as a comedy says something about the breakdown of the English language. The movie starts with Chevy Chase as an investment counselor who's asked Demi Moore, a new neighbor in his building, to drive out to the country. And the next morning, though, he's too hungover to drive.
Tell her I'm too tired, I'm sick, I can't drive her. Give her the car with my compliments, will you? Sir. I gotta get some sleep. Give me the keys, Mike.
Their trip ends in a nightmare when they're caught in a speed trap and fall into the sadistic hands of the depraved Valkenheiser family, presided over by a 106-year-old justice of the peace played by Aykroyd. Chevy Chase is offered a chance to live if he will marry the judge's granddaughter, played here in drag by John Candy.
You make this the bride? No, not in front of all these people, Your Honor. Now!
Okay, now those are some of the more palatable scenes in the movie. I won't go into the mutant toad people or the bone-crushing machine or the sheer visions of hell that are summed up by other moments in the movie. I guess maybe what Aykroyd thought he was making here was a cross between Beetlejuice and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but there aren't a whole lot of laughs in this movie, and finally it just grows sullen and desperate. I have nothing but sympathy for all of the actors and even more sympathy for the audience.
Yeah, I don't, you know, these people are getting paid. I mean, but we have to pay to see it, and again, losing the time. It is a depressing experience. I think that's what's shocking. Here it is labeled a comedy. We got big comedy stars in there, and you sit there, no laughs, and then the mood of the film, the look of it is dark, dank, and just unpleasant.
It's just really ugly. You know, I had a strange experience. I saw this movie on Tuesday night in a theater that was almost empty, but way in the back there were 3 teenagers who were making a lot of noise. A lot of noise. I don't mean talking loudly among themselves. I mean shouting and screaming. And at one point, I turned around and asked them if they could talk a little louder.
Okay.
Through the house, not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse.
Our X-ray subject this week, the controversial Santa Claus killer movie, Silent Night, Deadly Night. Actually, there have been 2 controversies about Silent Night, Deadly Night. Even before the film was released a couple of weeks ago, its TV ad campaign caused a furor with its brief depiction of an axe-carrying Santa Claus. The distributor of this film, TriStar Pictures, which is co-owned by Columbia Pictures, CBS, and Home Box Office, pulled the commercial out of release after a week of protest by parents led by a Milwaukee group. Of course, commercials like that usually die out after a week anyway, so thanks a lot, fellas. But there's no question in my mind that the showing of Santa with an axe on free TV and commercials is sick and sleazy and mean-spirited. So let's repeat the names of the people who did it. TriStar Pictures, co-owned by Columbia Pictures, CBS, and Home Box Office. Shame on you. Now, as for the film, I've got news for you. It's worse than the TV ads. Telling a typical mad slasher story about a boy who witnesses his father being shot and his mother being stabbed to death by a maniac in a Santa Claus suit. So now the traumatized kid grows up and is asked to work in a toy store as Santa one Christmas, and it freaks him out. He impales one naked girl on a set of antlers, spears another woman with a bow and arrow, and another with a knife, and yes, we even see Santa give one little girl a bloody knife as a gift and threaten another little girl with physical punishment as he sits on his lap. You might think that it would be funny, Roger, or it's played as quite sick in the film. So let me repeat the names of the writer and director and producers of this film. Michael Hickey wrote the film, Charles E. Sellier Jr. directed it, and Ira Richard Barmack produced it. You people have nothing to be proud of, even if you made a few bucks off of all the negative publicity. Your profits truly are blood money. And Silent Night, Deadly Night now has the distinction of joining I Spit on Your Grave as one of the two most contemptible films I've seen. And I don't mean to think it's campy. It really is quite awful.
I'm glad you mentioned those people's names because quite frequently they think, gee, we'll make this exploitation film, we'll be able to buy our Mercedes and live in Bel Air and nobody will ever know what we did. But I would like to hear them explaining to their children and their grandchildren that it's only a movie. I think that would be a real interesting explanation.
My Bloody Valentine, our next film, is another mad slasher going after mostly women victims, this time in a coal mining town. I'm really getting sick of these pictures. The movie starts right out by assaulting us. Even before we get to read the title, we see a woman in a state of undress get impaled on a pickaxe. Typical of adult thrills in the movie is a scene where the mad killer stalks his victim in a laundromat decorated for Valentine's Day.
Oh, no. I wonder who sent this. Jake? Oh. Roses are red, violets are blue. One is dead, and so are you? No! No! Get away! Get away! Get away! No! No! Ah! 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 Get away! No! No!
Well, there's a disgusting new wrinkle in this kind of film. We see a middle-aged woman hacked apart. The big guessing game here, if anybody cares, and I sure didn't, is who is the crazed killer wearing the wetsuit and the miner's helmet? It turns out that his identity has to do with a killing that happened 20 years earlier on Valentine's Day in that same town. Gee, isn't that interesting? You want to see someone receive a bloody human heart in a Valentine-shaped candy box? Then you'll love My Bloody Valentine.
Gee, I guess I didn't love it very much. Was it only 2 years ago that we were praising a movie called Halloween? We thought it was kind of nice, had some style and wit to it. This movie is about the 7th direct ripoff of Halloween. We have New Year's Evil, Prom Night, Friday the 13th, Terror Train. They all have the same formula. Something terrible happens 20 years ago or 10 years ago. Then there's a party and all the teenagers get together in the same place, the old train or the old deserted mine shaft or something, and the berserk maniac comes down on them with a knife or a pickaxe or something. First of all, it's disgusting. Secondly, it's so appallingly lacking in imagination. You would think that they could at least come up with a new disgusting angle.
Yeah, I'm sitting there wondering why these people get involved in these films. I mean, what do the women think who are getting pickaxes thrown at them? What do they think they're contributing to art? And I'm also, as you rattle off that list of names, I'm thinking of all those hours we've both logged in movie theaters, slumped over in our seats, just shaking our heads. Boy, I wish this trend would really end.
Boy, well, Bloody Valentine isn't doing very much business. Maybe that's a good sign. Let's move on to a much better movie.
At the movies, or this week, or next at the movies, or coming up next, the film that had the biggest opening weekend of any box office movie this year. Our next movie is Friday the 13th, the final chapter, an immoral and reprehensible piece of trash that sold more tickets on its opening weekend than any other movie so far in 1984, and that is a very, very depressing commentary. It really makes me sad to think of all those moviegoers spending $4.50, $5, most of them teenage kids, sitting there watching this sad, cynical, depressing movie. Now, needless to say, Paramount Studios, the distributor of this film, didn't authorize any clips of the film for use on television. They like to make the money, but maybe they're a little bit ashamed of the movie. They like to hide it from critics like ourselves. But here are some scenes from the Coming Attractions trailer showing that the fourth Friday the 13th movie is just a cynical retread of the first three.
3 times before, you have felt the terror, known the madness, lived the horror. But this is the one. you've been screaming for. Friday the 13th, the final chapter. Jason is back. He moves like a shadow, dark and silent.
Sorry, you changed your mind?
He never utters a word. He doesn't even seem to breathe.
Where the hell's the corkscrew?
He simply, mindlessly, mercilessly kills. But now, Jason's reign of terror is over.
Yeah, real great. Jason, you can't hear him, you can't see him, he hardly even breathes. He's the latest word in leading men from the geniuses at Paramount Pictures. You get the idea. Friday the 13th, the final chapter, is 90 minutes of teenagers being strangled, stabbed, impaled, chopped up, and mutilated. That's all this movie is. It's just mindless, bloody violence. And just think of the message this film offers to its teenage audience. The world is a totally evil place, this movie says. It'll kill you. It doesn't matter what your dreams and hopes and ambitions are. It doesn't matter if you have a new boyfriend or a new girlfriend or you've got plans for the future. You can forget those plans because you're going to wind up dead. There is literally nothing else in this movie. And the sickest thing is, this isn't the final chapter. That's just an advertising gimmick. The ending clearly sets up a sequel. And what I want to know is, I wonder if they're going to be heartless and cynical enough to make the sequel, because why not? They've already taken the bucket to the cesspool 4 times for this sludge. I think the people who made this movie ought to be ashamed of themselves, and that's what I think, Gene.
Yeah.
And I'm going to vote no.
I had a feeling you might. I got as upset as you did. I don't know whether the teenagers, the message will be of this film that the world is hopeless out there, because I think that anybody who sees this picture will see it either the way you did and I did, which is that it's just a mayhem film. You might as well watch car accidents edited together, or they will think it's just a lark and just a fun. I don't think anyone's going to take this as a worldview picture. I really don't.
But wait a minute. See, the thing is, they made the first one. Okay.
I thought it was horrible.
The first one was horrible. Then they made the second one.
Yeah.
Then they made the third one in 3D. Then they made this one. By now, all it is the teenagers go to Crystal Lake and they're killed.
Roger, we don't have a dispute about the film. The only point that I'm
making...
It is a worldview.
Have you seen all 4 of them? What are they trying to tell you?
No. What they're trying to give kids is a roller coaster ride, and instead of the thing of falling off the roller coaster, it's will you get stabbed in some way?
Will you get disemboweled and eviscerated?
It's a terrible film. I'm just holding you back a little bit from what sounds a little bit soapboxy in terms of kids are going to take this as this is the way the world is. I don't think they'll do that. But what I am saying is this, that the film is literally about stabbing. In other words, if you like this picture, what you have liked, I believe, is the idea that someone will get a stick put through their body, because that's the essence of this movie. And the surprise is, it's not surprising.
I did probably sound a little soapboxy, but I'll tell you, I'm not saying the kids are going to believe that. I'm saying this is what the message is in the movie. Now, I sat in a theater, and I saw this with some kids, and they were, you watch them coming in. It's an R-rated picture. That means most of the people will be under 17. They're 13, they're 12, they're 14.
Okay, it's garbage.
They're coming in, they're sitting there for 2 hours. This is supposed to be fun. They're told it's fun. They see it advertised on television. It did a lot of business. Their older brothers and sisters went to see it. And what do they see for 2 hours? Just cynical defeatism.
It's terrible. It's a terrible film. I think a much more interesting point is that the message that it sends out is not that this is the way the world is, but that now you've really got on the subject, which is that watching girls, and it's mostly girls again, getting stuck is entertainment. See, that's the pornography.
It's really sick.
That this is legitimate entertainment too. That you can go to a theater
and the movie
pay for
doubled its money in its first weekend.
Okay.
Isn't that wonderful?
All right, coming up next.
Leave him. We're not leaving him here. He's got one inside of him. I can smell it.
200 years after her death, Sigourney Weaver is cloned back to life in Alien Resurrection, one of the big new films we'll be reviewing this week on Siskel and Ebert. I'm Gene Siskel of the Chicago Tribune.
I'm Roger Ebert of the Chicago Sun-Times. The Alien series of science fiction thrillers, which began so promisingly in 1979, has finally run completely out of steam. And if you doubt that, consider Alien Resurrection, the 4th in the series, where the original ideas that distinguished the first 2 movies are replaced, as they were in the 3rd, by countless shots of monsters jumping up and scaring everybody. Sigourney Weaver stars once again and is very good, the best thing in the film, as Ellen Ripley, the space scientist who killed herself at the end of the 3rd film to put a final end to the evil aliens, but alas, she didn't succeed. Now 2 centuries have passed, and a drop of her blood has been cloned to bring her back, personal memories and all.
It's a queen.
How did you know that?
She'll breed. You'll die.
Incredibly, a secret military faction needed Ripley to act as a foster mother for a new generation of aliens, which a galactic government wants to study for medical purposes.
So, we're a fast learner.
The ship crosses paths with a tramp freighter whose crew includes Winona Ryder as a woman with a secret. Ryder is a gifted actress, but she's never really convincing in this film. She doesn't have the ferocious concentration to go up against the grim Weaver character.
They've taken it out of you. Where is it? Is it on the ship?
You mean my baby?
There isn't a whole lot of plot, just enough to support the movie's premise, which is that this alien form reproduces like crazy and has only one speed, all-out attack.
Moving! It's jammed!
In her review of one of the Alien movies, Pauline Kael called it an example of the boo movie. Things jump up and go boo when we're supposed to be scared. When they jump up once in a long while unexpectedly, as they did in the 1979 Alien, we were scared. But in Alien Resurrection, the characters are unfocused, the plot is piecemeal, and the monsters are putting on the same old act.
Boy, it wore me out very quickly. Yeah. And the premise, Roger, the convoluted story, I mean, of setting this up, I mean, I'm lost in 15 minutes. I'm glad you explained it. Now I figured out what was going on. But it's not about that.
I'm not sure that I did explain.
Oh, I don't even care if you did. It is
200 years go past, and they get a drop of her blood, and it has the alien embryo in it. They're able to clone her and the alien baby.
I'll believe it, but here's what it is.
Okay.
It's 2 hours of teeth and slime and exploding sex, and that's a noise, and that's all it really is. And I felt as I walked out that I had endured an experience and certainly not enjoyed
well,
it.
those aliens seem to be able to reproduce themselves at will, to grow into tons and tons of alien biomass, despite apparently no food, and they're able to attack at will, go anywhere they want to, and yet they're so dumb that they always get defeated. You'd think that eventually they'd win.
I hate to see a first-class brain, yours, talk about this movie to the extent you just did.
It is a painful side, I realize that, yes.
You're wasting your neurons, my friend.
Thank
okay. This film is Vampire in Brooklyn, and after knocking Eddie Murphy's last few pictures, I was hopeful for this one because Murphy was doing what critics have long requested, including the two of us, work with a solid director and co-star with a strong woman. Alas, his latest picture still stinks. Eddie Murphy's film career has bigger problems, I guess, than I thought. In Vampire in Brooklyn, Murphy plays a vampire from the Bermuda Triangle who comes to New York looking for a mate. But first, an early scene establishing him as a vampire as he comes to the aid of a numbers runner played by Kadeem Hardison.
I've been stabbed, and I've been hanged, and I've been burned. Even broken on the rack once, but I've never been shot before. It kind of itches a little.
Who plays Murphy's prospective love partner? It's Angela Bassett, Oscar nominated for her strong portrayal of Tina Turner and What's Love Got to Do with It. However, their romantic scenes together seem tame.
I haven't felt like this since... God, I've never felt like this.
How would you like to feel like this every night?
Is that a trick question?
The movie is also stopped cold every time Murphy pops up disguised in a cameo role, here playing an Italian-American punk.
Police brutality! You're the police! Something with the same... Amorini, so train me and you right now, eh?
Vampire in Brooklyn has few thrills, which is a surprise because it was directed by Wes Craven, a real horror film master. Maybe he couldn't juggle Murphy's comedy demands and the horror genre. All I know is that Vampire in Brooklyn just sits there on the big screen, totally limp, not frightening, not romantic, not funny.
Gene, I'm in total agreement with you. And the screenplay is based on a story by Murphy and his two brothers.
That may be the problem.
I think maybe they should start out with somebody else's screenplay and not think they're geniuses at screenplay writing, because they don't answer question number one. Who do we care about in this movie, and why in the world should we care about the Eddie Murphy character, who is basically negative and seen in a very confused light? In fact, the whole movie is extremely chaotic when it comes to its point. You know, who do we care about? Right. Where is the story? Yeah. What is the payoff? And why does it matter?
We're not sure whether he's sending up. First, you assume, because it's Eddie Murphy as a vampire, you assume he's going to say a comedy.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have the heart to go all the way with that.
No.
You know what? Maybe the best solution is he goes and makes another concert film on, on film, because
I don't know. This movie, at one point early in the film, one of his co-actors says, "Don't pull that Blackula stuff on me." And it reminded me, Blackula is a better movie than this.
Absolutely.
This looks like a movie from the early 70s blaxploitation period, and it looks like a bad one from that period. Okay. Our next movie is named Ghost Dad, starring Bill Cosby in the second major turkey in a row from this most popular of television stars. He's a ghost in this movie, and the rules are sometimes you see him and sometimes you don't, and you know you're in trouble when the best times are when you don't. Why is he so effective on the small screen and so lost on the big screen? The movie stars Cosby as a hard-working professional man, a widower with a teenage daughter and two smaller children. He's so busy he communicates to them with pre-recorded tape cassettes.
Right.
You
that
know,
was
this
funny
is Daddy saying good night, Daddy, she says to the mini cassette recorder. One day he gets involved in a bizarre traffic accident, and as his body disappears inside a sinking taxi cab, Cosby's spirit begins to make appearances as a ghost.
What? I am. You're an Iranian housewife. A fish. A ghost?
One of the neighbor kids is a snoop who sees Cosby's ghostly behavior and thinks he knows the explanation.
That you're an alien.
What?
I want $50,000 in small, unmarked bills right now, or I go to the newspapers.
Ghost Dad is a short movie that feels real long, with its strained attempts to wring humor out of the Cosby ghost in one awkward situation after another. Bill Cosby may not be one of the greatest actors of our age, but on TV he certainly does do a good job of bringing refreshing humor to a family situation. What went wrong in this movie? Why does he seem to go over the top with every emotion, overacting so obviously that he seems to be telegraphing every possible laugh? His face, if it's funny, he's like this. If it's sad, he's like this. If he's scared, he's like this. Until you think he must have gone to acting 101 over and over again and never graduated. There are all sorts of things wrong with the logic of this movie, like, for example, a scene where his boss is waiting in the next room and his whole job and his family's financial security is all on the line. So what does he do? He leaves the house for a chat with the lady next door. But never mind the logic. Nobody would care about that if Ghost Dad was funny. But it's not funny. It's one of the worst movies so far this year. Throw in last year if you want to.
Yeah.
Year before that.
I sat there very surprised. I don't know if he can't pick a script. Leonard Part 6 and then this. I mean, these are shockingly bad films. You come to them with goodwill because this is a comedian, so we always want to, we're prepared to laugh. Someone said to me that they think that, that because he's a stand-up comic at his core, that like Richard Pryor and other comic actors, you can throw in Robin Williams down the line, if they don't get a character that is as interesting as the one they play on stage in real life, they lose it right from the first frame. If he isn't as sharp as he is on stage doing stand-up or as a monologist, I can't understand it. To see him, it gets real sad when you see him doing special effects. Here you have this major entertainer and you see him flying through the air.
Just one clinker after another in this film.
It's dead from the first frame. Guardian, about a demonic babysitter who ends up terrorizing a yuppie couple and their baby boy. The babysitter is a descendant of the ancient Druids who worshipped trees. She hopes to sacrifice the child to a tree. First, she has to charm the infant.
This is Jamara. And this is Pyewacket.
When the father suspects that the baby is in jeopardy, he confronts the babysitter, much to his wife's disapproval.
I told you I wanted Dr. Klein to see him.
He's perfectly fine. He had a lovely time, actually.
Sure he had a lovely time. Babies always have a lovely time. He has a lovely time lying on the rug.
Will you please stop shouting? What's going on here?
The Guardian was directed by Bill Friedkin of The Exorcist fame, and it too has its supernatural moments as the father tries to rescue the baby from being sacrificed to a giant tree near his home. That's more silly than frightening, and The Guardian also is a routine police thriller after the couple has apparently killed the babysitter with their car.
You saw the tree?
Mm-hmm.
The babies.
You mean the carvings?
They're not carvings. That's where she took the babies. She takes
Mr. Sterling, we didn't find her body.
What?
I don't think this plot works at all. I don't think it's at all important what this woman is going to do with the baby, so much for the story. On the movie level, the visuals aren't compelling either. The big tree is your standard horror movie tree with animated limbs. The couple is boring. The police are standard movie dullards who immediately take the side of the guilty. And the special effects from Bill Friedkin of The Exorcist, well, they're nothing that, shall we say, will turn your head. There's not much to like about The Guardian.
You know, there is one area, though, Gene, where this movie breaks important new ground, and this is something that movie trivia experts
Oh, you're
should
going
study.
to be funny now.
Yes, I am. I'm going to be funny. This is the first horror movie in which a chainsaw is used against a tree.
I understand. I mean, and then it spews out blood and all that.
Now, thank you for that enormous laugh of support
Well,
there.
it's
My
not that
funny
funny.
remark. You know, it's too bad about William Friedkin, because here is an important director. To Live and Die in L.A. was a very, very good
French
movie.
Connection, obviously.
The French Connection. His last film, Rampage, which was never released, which I had an opportunity to see, was a true crime story. He was right at the top of his form. This man is making great movies that nobody sees, and then he, you know, probably because he wanted to keep working, made a movie like The Guardian, which will get released and won't do his career or his reputation any good at all.
There really isn't an element here that's compelling. I mean, you know, if the Druids are supposed to be a threat to us, I mean, The Exorcist, it was a real threat to the world. There's nothing going on here. I mean, we laugh at the tree. It just falls apart at every critical step.
Yeah, it's just real hard to get involved with a babysitter that wants to sacrifice a baby to a tree. When we come